Hello and welcome to CAD-Prof.com. This is level 2 in using CAD for a production type of project. So this particular project, we're going to be uh, preparing a landscape design for both the front yard and the backyard. This particular residence is in Ontario. It's a house that I had designed and I was the project manager for the construction of it. So I'm quite familiar with all the aspects of it. But taking the perspective from a landscape designer, what would we actually do? So here's some of the information and how we would review it, as well as take notes on particulars. So the first thing we want to do is look at the landscape, look at the property, and also look at the architecture and how the two are related right now, and how we can enhance the architecture through good landscape design. You got to appreciate a custom home like this. There's been a lot of time, energy, and money spent by the client to come down to a design that they like. And therefore, we want to enhance that design by extending those features outside of the home. So first of all, take a look at the property. The property is several hundred acres, so we don't have to really worry about neighbors other than a visual distraction to the north. The orientation of this top plan view is the bottom of the page is south, the right is east, the left is west, and the top is north. And from here on in, we'll be talking in those terms. So the front of the house, you can already see that they have a temporary driveway. It's a paved driveway that eventually will become a bit more decorative using paving stones. And then the back, they've got a very simple patio that will be replaced with our design. So we're designing the front yard and the backyard. But before we do that, we have to examine the project and the architecture behind it. You have to appreciate it. A custom home like this is at 4,500 square feet plus the area of the garage. The home has already evolved into a design that the homeowners like. So this is a French country, French chateau type of design and flair. It's contemporized in some manner, and I'll point out those elements. But we have to be sensitive to the architecture because the clients love the home. So we want to enhance this architecture. And in order to do that, we must examine it from all the different angles. So we're approaching the house here. So we are looking west and we're coming from the east. If you take a look at the map, we're looking in this direction and we're looking beyond the house. And this is the front of the home. Now, the photographs are important not only from a perspective of the architecture, but also from looking at it in regards to sun angles and wind directions, land slope. That we're going to eventually itemize in greater detail. But for now, it's just to take a look at the house and the architecture and the layout. So as we approach the front of the home, you'll notice that there's several sections to it. The right side is the entranceway. You can see that. The left side that I've pointed out here, this is where we have private offices, and then we have the sleeping quarters. So this is where we're going to minimize the amount of landscape other than natural sources because we don't want to attract an audience going through there or any public traveling through there. So there's not going to be any walkways or driveways or anything of that nature, but simple trees to decorate this portion of it. The driveway will end somewhere along this edge here, and you can see how the land slopes. That's important. One of the things we're going to be doing is creating a retaining wall, and this is the retaining wall location. So that location right here is right here from the top view. And that retaining wall is only a couple feet tall, about 4 or 6 feet long, and it's to hold the dirt from the driveway from entering into the lower portion of the home. Because these windows you can see here, they're fairly large. There are window wells, and the basement does have a high ceiling. So we want to protect this area from water. We want to protect it from the dirt migrating in that direction. So the driveway will end somewhere here. The clients also have a requirement to have some planting material at the front of their home. So as you approach it, you can have some very small type of plants that will be in this particular area. I'm going to look at that and examine that a bit later on as we come around the full size of the project. But right now you can see these photographs are taken just around the noon to 1 o'clock period, and you can see it's already dark. So again, we have to be sensitive with the plants that we're going to be providing here because they will not get a lot of sunlight. And then you have the garage, and the garage is fairly significant. We'll see a bit more of it later on. So we have to provide a paving area and entrance area. And you can see that we have sort of a straight on access to the front entrance of how we're going to approach the home. And we're going to have some sort of gated entrance in here. Now, we're not fencing the whole property. There's a couple of 100 acres here. That'd be ridiculous. So we're just fencing a small section on either side to complement the entrance way to the home. So let's work our way around the home. From this angle, we're actually faced in the southeast direction, looking northwest. So that's what this corner represents. And again, these are all the sleeping quarters. So minimum landscaping here, other than maybe some trees and arrangements to give it more of a natural forest type of feel, but we don't want to attract people coming down here. You can see temporarily they've placed boulders here to stop the dirt runoff into this area and to protect the window wells that are in this particular location. And you can see the size and the scale of the garages. Now the back of the garage, you can actually see there's an opening. They have a very large tractor that they use for the acreage, also for their own plowing and things of that nature. So similar to what is paved here, this is going to be the parking area, as well as we want an area that can have one or two guests park as well in this lotted area. So as we work around here, the drainage also works towards this edge, and the land naturally slopes to this particular location. You can actually see in the dirt, and these are the observations you need to make, how the water is naturally draining. And we want to keep that in place as much as we can because it's already found a natural flow. And as long as that natural flow doesn't impede on the house, as in it doesn't go towards the house and provide or cause any leakage, we like to maintain that. You can see the boulders and how the scale of them. We want, like I said, about a 2-foot retaining wall in terms of height and about 4 to 6 feet long. You can see the parking garage area, and this is a true timber frame home. So you can see timber frame elements throughout the project, and that will become important as we work through different elements like the pergola and the gazebo and any sort of structure like that, which will have those timber frame type of feel to them. Now, this is a traditional French provincial or French chateau type of home that combines that red brick with the stone. And if you take a close look at the stone, it's fairly coarse and the mortar joints are fairly large. It's almost like a plastering type of effect between the brick. And that's got to be considered in our architecture and design of the landscape because we want to make sure that we use those colors. And you can see in the roof there's a slight flare on the edges as well. And that's typical of that type of home in that location, in the provincial areas of France. So as we work through around the home, you can see how the shading will be affected. And this end here is where all the sleeping quarters are. And that's why I'm saying we have to have nice trees in this area, not overly populated, something that will allow the light through. And this is where we have not only the bedrooms, but the walk-in closets. But in the basement, we have a lot of light that's coming in. This is the only end of the house that will have all this natural light coming in. So we don't want to overpopulate it with trees because we do want some natural lighting to come in. So in here, you'll see as you come around, there's another retaining wall that they just simply have boulders for now, just to stop the dirt from going down and maybe filling in one of these wells. So as we work our way around the house, now we're facing northeast, or we're somewhere in this location facing this way. So this is where the prevalent sun and the sun angles are going to be. This is where it starts warming up in the later afternoon or early afternoon to late evening hours. And this is where the majority of our landscaping is going to occur in the backyard. However, we have to be sensitive to the different parts and pieces. So these 4 doors that are back here, these are French doors off their master bedroom. So it's a very private area. And what we want to make sure is this. They would like to be able to come out in the morning and have breakfast and sit down, maybe a small little chateau type of table and chairs, maybe some wrought iron or things of that nature, and just sit down and have breakfast. But this has to be private. What does that mean? It has to be somehow separated from the rest of the design. So this little area up in here will have some sort of separator or some sort of separation between the rest of the property and definitely no connections like walkways or pathways or things of that nature. Right beside it is a master bathroom that has a sitting tub, and they like to be able to sit in that tub and look outside. So we want to beautify and frame out the views because to the west of this property is a couple of hundred acres of beautiful landscape. It rises to the distance, and at the next concession, there's a hill and a beautiful property up there that has a gorgeous sort of view from this property. So we want to maintain those views as we work through the house. Now, this particular property does have a geothermal bed. We're not going to consider it. It's actually in this location. It's very significant. Now, typically you need to know everything that's happening underneath and therefore avoid any sort of landscaping that could damage that. We're going to ignore that. That's what this area in here is. It's actually where all the piping comes in, and it's going to have a small little accessible deck in case there ever needs to be access to all the plumbing that comes into the house, the geothermal bed that comes in and out of the home at this location. That's why it's designed the way it is. This window that's back there in the shade is the media room, and it needs to stay dark. And that's why it's recessed into that space to maintain a shade even during the day, and then with the addition of curtains, they'll make it nice and dark in that space. So this side of the property, the south side of the property on the west, has a very particular need and use. So as we work our way to the rest of the property, you can see this is sort of the formal area that has exposure from this pair of French doors, which is the formal dining room. This entire area with the large timber frame, that's a great room, and it goes from floor to ceiling, so it's massive space inside, and there are views from there from the inside. So we don't want to impede it with any large structures in this particular area because it will impede the view. And then we have a door on the left there, and that's from the kitchen. It's slightly off the kitchen. This is the dinette, and you'll see it better as we move around the project. But what I want to point out is this pair of French doors and how the people entertain is simply they have family that or friends that come over. They'll be eating in the formal dining room, but what they'd like to do is extend this room outwards in this particular area to allow people to go outside and enjoy the outdoors. So there's going to be a requirement out here for a couch-like seating, a couple of large tub chairs, a coffee table, and maybe a pergola or gazebo that will provide some shelter. So this shelter is really designed for the evening in case there's a light sort of what can I say, mist or rain or anything of that nature and still be able to sit outside. So you got to consider that. Now, it could be just a pergola, which won't stop the rain, but will provide an overhead canopy that we can then add lighting to. And that's really what's critical. So they don't care which one you use. It's just to provide an outdoor living space that extends right off this dining room. And that's really where it needs to be. So you're kind of restricted in where you're going to place things, even though you got hundreds of acres, only because of what the client is requiring. So as we move around here, you can see there's a lip that goes here. So there's going to be a step down to a deck area, maybe another step down to the flat area where the extended living quarters are. This existing patio we can completely ignore. It's just temporary. But we have to be aware of this timber frame and these large timber posts and the fact that we will not attach anything to this house. That's something that's absolutely critical. Nothing gets attached to the house. So if you have a pergola, gazebo, or any other overhead structure, it's going to be away from the building. This is a central fireplace that's on the inside only. There's nothing on the outside. So we don't want anything really on this wall. If you put a couple of little planters or something in here with some small plants that just kind of crest the bottom of the window, perfect, because that will give a framing to the window and the view as you look out and may be able to fill this area in very nicely. Okay, let's keep moving around. The other thing you should be aware of is not only the stonework, but the brickwork, the timber frame, and all the colors. We want to incorporate those colors into our project. Now, as we come around here, you'll see that this is the door that leads out of there's a small little hallway between the kitchen and the great room. So this is the door that's going to be the primary access to the backyard. Remember, this is a private access for the owners in the morning only, where they want to sit and have a cup of coffee, or maybe a late evening if they don't have guests over. This is the main access to the backyard. So consider that in your plan and your project, and look at the colors and the elements and the stonework. So when you're picking materials, the materials must complement what you see here. So what do we see? This is board and batten. So it's a pine board which has been painted this taupe neutral type of color. It matches all the doors and windows. We have large panes in each one of them. We have these solid stone castings that act as windowsills. We have primarily this red brick. Now it's an assorted range of brick that's typical of contemporary architecture that's reflecting a chateau, a French chateau, or a French cottage type of feel. So that's where those colors come from. And same with the stone. You'll notice the stone doesn't have square and even layers like brick. It's more of a random cast, and that can be reflected in all sorts of things, maybe into the retaining wall or anything like that that will also incorporate stone. So as we work through here, this to the left is the dinette. So this dinette it sits on its own, and it has a spectacular view around the backyard. And it also has an attachment right to the kitchen. This is the kitchen area. So the kitchen counter sits here, the massive windows that look to the north. Unfortunately, the north view is really ugly. And what we need to do is provide barriers and screens on this wall or this area or somewhere along this particular area to make sure that anybody who's enjoying the landscape in the backyard is going to not see the view out to the far north. The land is lower there, and they tend to store, let's just say, garbage and cars and trucks and all sorts of things that lie around forever. So we want to really sort of provide some sort of barrier here. This is also access. This is a staircase that goes down into the basement of the house. This is the door that accesses the garage from the back. And this is where the septic tank is. So there won't be any landscaping through this. It will be very generic because this particular area is more of a commercial area or a maintenance area, and therefore we don't want to actually have anything that we work in this area as part of the landscaping. So we want some barrier, and we want to kind of provide an area that is sheltered from the rest of it and uh, basically deters people from entering it. So when we look at this top plan, there's your dinette, here's your kitchen. So from this point this way, we want to provide some sort of shelter or screening. We don't want any landscaping in this section whatsoever. In fact, the septic tank, which is right here, you can just make it out on the left, extreme left of the photo. The septic tank here has to get pumped out. That's why we actually have an access back here through the garage that a hose can be run and then pump out the tank. And this is the actual tile field. It's fairly significant and large. And again, we must make sure that there's no landscaping on there. So this is basically how the project looks, the area of the project. Now here I've got a couple photographs showing they're excavating here to put in their retaining wall, or it's just before the stone is. You'll notice a black line. Just for your information, that's waterproofing. And typically we can't bring the soil above that level. We should really keep mulch below that level as well, because there's weeping holes that are just underneath the ledge of the stonework, and weeping holes allow the house to breathe. So we should never cover weeping holes, and the mulch needs to be below that. And you'll see that these um, timber frame posts sit on a metal frame that then are embedded into these concrete columns, and we'll be providing a decorative end to that. And actually, I think that shows up in a couple of images later on. I'll get to it. And so this is sort of the height of all the landscape that occurs there, and that's just for general information's sake. We don't really need to know it for this particular project at this time, but if we were drawing elevations, which I'm providing here in CAD for you, elevations of this actual house, when you're doing the landscape design work for that, you'd actually show where that line is to make sure that whoever's doing the landscape does not go beyond that. And you'll notice that the front steps are fairly significantly elevated, and that's something that we need to be aware of because we have to provide some sort of front steps to get to that front door, and here's access, you can see, to the garage and where it is, and so you can get a sense of where that line is. Now, the other reason I have these photographs is that they were shot prior to 11 a.m. And you can still see that there's a fair bit of light coming into this, but it's not overly lit once we get into that 1 o'clock period. So we get some good sunshine in the morning. We can provide planters and planting material all through here for that purpose. You can see where the garage entrances are, and we have to provide some sort of driveway here. The back opening, you can see here's for that tractor to be able to get up the septic field that's behind there. And look at, once again, the architecture, the little sort of curvatures at the ends of the roof, the eaves ends, the stonework around the windows, the timber framework, the timber design. That's all very critical as we're selecting materials for the project to reflect what's already there. So the further shots that I have here simply provide more detail of the information. And you can see here, they've already provided in this particular house some of the stonework to be stepped up. And this is similar to what you're going to be doing, but you're going to be specifying the actual stones for the project. I've thrown in a couple of images just of the timber frame. This is in the house, through the house, and how they actually attach it. It's fairly significant. And it is an architectural feature within the house. So the decorative elements inside the house are similar to the decorative elements outside. The inside, it's all pine. On the outside, it's all cedar. And that's what gives it its look. So it's fairly detailed on what they actually do to put the pieces together. It's very significant. And the only reason I'm pointing them out is if a client has spent so much money and time to put these elements together, we must take care of these elements when we're doing the landscape and enhance and frame the elements, not hide them. So any kind of planter that or planting arrangement that you put in here will enhance the framework, will not cover it up. So to put in something like a climbing vine or something like that is absolutely ridiculous. This is something that you have to be aware of the existing architecture. And look at the details that they've done now around the posts. They've hidden those ugly sonotubes that support the posts, and they've brought stonework right up to the other side to make it decorative. These are the type of photographs you need to really review and examine to make sure you take these elements into your landscape design and into your landscape project. So as a quick recap, let's go right back to the beginning here. I'm going to look at the different sides of the house. So we have the east, the west, the south, the north. The north is ugly, so we want to make sure that we provide barriers from the view. The west is absolutely gorgeous, so we want to expose these views as much as we can. The east is the approach of vehicles and people that are coming to visit the house. We don't want any walkways around the south side of the home. And then we have particular areas in and around the backyard that separate these different spaces for the different purposes. So this is typical of an examination that you do of a site to get a sense of the project. The only thing that's missing here is a map or a topographical map to show you the slopes of the land. You get a pretty good sense right from here that the land's fairly flat except for the south side of it, which slopes down a couple of feet. But for the most cases, it's fairly flat. And you can see in the back here, just through here, how far you can view into the back of the property. You can see actually right through the house and the windows. So that view back there is spectacular, and we want to make sure that that's part of the project. So this is a very quick site analysis. One of the things we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks is actually taking this project, putting it on PDF files, and I have that available to you. You'll be printing them off, and then we're going to do a proper site analysis. So that needs to be printed off. We're going to be using markers and pens and sketching all over this thing to make sure that we understand how the clients want to use the property, what are the sun angles, what are the views. All that will be put down on paper, and that will help you prepare for your design.